welcome. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Stop Phishing Attacks and Blocking Email Impersonations. I'm Brett, the CEO of 101 Data Solutions. Bring high quality specialist data storage, cybersecurity and consultancy solutions to mid to large size organizations across the UK since 2008. So today we're focusing on cyber threats. The world of cyber threats is constantly changing, as you're probably well aware reading the press. There's new vulnerabilities are discovered and potential cyber threats shift. Organizations need to be ready to respond with updated threat hunting procedures, best practices and technologies to stay ahead of the curve. As a business, we've traditionally been focused on data protection and partner with companies like ArcServe, Master, which have often protected our customers from ransomware attacks, data breaches, and other malicious activity. In recent times, more worryingly, the most successful and commonly used attack vector is through email. We looked at this threat and identified the need to plug on the source issue. We decided to expand our services, so had a look around, market checking, and we came across Redsift last year. I think it was mid last year. So Redsift are a leader in domain and email security. With the addition of Redsift, we were able to provide our customers with better protection against phishing and email impersonations. As organizations, they must understand the latest threats to protect themselves from these malicious emails. The stakes are definitely high and hackers will try anything. So you need to equip yourself with up-to-date defenses against them. Implementing a layered approach will help all members secure and minimize IT overhead, which is where we and our partner Redsift can help. So during this webinar, we'll look at the latest threat landscapes and share best practice for fighting phishing attacks and email impersonation. I want you to meet Harry. He's the UK lead for Redsift. So approximately 40 minutes, Harry's going to run through 3 different solutions on the Redsift platform, which looks to address different areas of email and domain security risks, and he'll highlight how we can help you mitigate these issues. Feel free to ask any questions using the chat feature during the presentation. We'll pick them up at the end in the short Q&A. Harry, it's over to you.
Lovely stuff. Thanks for the introduction, Brett, and thanks everyone for joining. So yeah, today I'm just going to run through some of the different areas that Redsift addresses with our different solutions. And in particular, we're going to focus on our DMARC solution and how when that is implemented fully, it will protect you against exact domain impersonation. And actually on the call, we're going to run a live spoof example with Brett's email, just to show how easy a spoof attack is to carry out unless you have DMARC fully configured. So I'm going to get up a couple of slides, which will give a short introduction to Redsift, and then we'll look more into the actual solutions themselves. So Redsift, who are we? We've been around for about 7 years now. And as a company, what we're looking to do is build a number of different solutions on top of our platform that all work together to solve a number of different issues within the kind of cybersecurity landscape. And what we're looking at particularly is email and domain security. So today's kind of email attacks, a lot of this kind of is really why we picked to go into the email security space and what sort of areas we're looking to address. So on the far left here, we're seeing how a very large percentage of compromised network attacks actually come through and start with some kind of phishing email or a social engineering attack. So at the moment, you know, we've all heard a lot in the news about ransomware attacks, that kind of side of things, and how you can have backup recovery services, etc., to protect against that. But what is the core way that a lot of those attacks come into businesses is through malicious emails. So not only are we looking to help companies block those emails, we're also helping their employees to pick up, detect, and not interact with them as well. Another interesting thing we've seen, particularly in the last 2 years, is the kind of new types of phishing emails that are coming up on a sort of a daily basis, new variations of these emails, which we need to keep one step ahead of the game on. They're becoming more sophisticated and more likely to trip up and fool employees into interacting with them, thinking that they are actually legitimate, real emails. And all this is kind of equating to the fact that the cost of these business email compromise scams are very large and they're always growing. And the long-term effect of these is actually kind of a big damage on your brand reputation. If you're seen to be involved in some kind of business email compromise or in a network compromise attack, that really damages your brand reputation, which can cause issues in the long run around your customers actually looking to continue working with you and then essentially losing trust in your service. So the three different Redshift solutions here we've got in this kind of triangle. On the far left here, we've got our solution that's been out in the market for about sort of 5 years now, which is on DMARC. This looks to implement the DMARC protocol for our customers. We're going to touch on this in more detail in a minute, but essentially this allows companies to protect their exact domains from impersonation attacks. These tend to be the most effective types of email spoofing attacks, as they appear to be exactly from someone's email. And we'll look at that later with Brett's. And the tool here actually helps our customers fully set up this protocol using nice, unique features like dynamic SPF and investigate that we'll look at in the demo, all with the ultimate goal to get our customers to DMARC protection mode, which is known as P-reject, which ultimately means no one can then impersonate your domain. That's protecting your employees, your partners, and your customers from receiving spoof, illegitimate emails from your domain. The second solution we've brought out more recently pairs up quite nicely with this in the domain security piece. It's called On Domain. Now, what this looks to do is actually go out and scan the internet. So it scans 150 top level and subdomains a day to search for any potential malicious lookalike domains, which could be impersonating your brand as well. It also does logo detection as well. So people are misusing your brand's logo on different websites, lookalike websites. It will detect this too. And we've integrated a takedown service to the solution. So if you do then start spotting illegitimate lookalike domains, you can then take those down to further protect your brand. And then finally, the other solution that we'll see in action today is our inbound email security solution called On Inbox. So this acts very much in an employee's inbox, where it adds a kind of an extra layer of protection with a threat detection by adding traffic light symbols into employees' emails to help detect against the more sophisticated phishing emails that might get through things like a spam filter. And it also uses banner warnings to help employees really be alerted if malicious emails landed in their inbox that they should not interact with. So we'll look at that later on as well, as it will actually appear in the phishing email. But we're going to focus today mainly on DMARC, because we see this as kind of the core starting point for email security and ensuring that your brand and domain is protected. So it's always good to look back initially as to why DMARC was first produced. So back in about 2012, some of the big email providers got together, like Yahoo, Google, and Microsoft here, as at that point, there was no way of actually preventing exact domain impersonation attacks, which seems a bit crazy. So about 10 years ago, there was no way of actually blocking your exact domain from being impersonated. So this is how DMARC essentially came along, was to block these kind of attacks. So how does it work? DMARC itself is an email security protocol, which is just a simple TXT record that will show you what that looks like, and we produce those TXT records for our customers. What you then do is add this into your DNS record. As soon as you add a DMARC record into your DNS, every time anyone sends an email from your domain, whether that's a legitimate service or an illegitimate service, the receiver of that mail, the service they're using, will then send you back a DMARC report, which is essentially saying what sending service is sending from your domain, what their current setup status is in terms of SPF and DKIM, i.e. their authentication. And this gives you all sorts of good information around if, there might be shadow IT services you weren't aware you were using, potential spoofing services, as well as services you are using. You then want to see whether or not they're correctly set up with these two protocols, SPF and DKIM. So that's your first kind of key benefit you get from DMARC, is reporting. And after this call, I'd urge you to look to set up time with us to actually set up a reporting version of our solution, which we can run for a couple of weeks and then evaluate the data with you afterwards. So that's the first stage of DMARC. Now, if we're looking at this sort of diagram here, essentially what we're helping our customers do with OnDMARC is ensuring that each one of the legitimate sending services you use, like Office 365 or maybe MailChimp for marketing, is correctly configured with SPF and DKIM. This is also done within your DNS. Once these two protocols are fully configured, This means all of your legitimate emails, when they land in the recipient's inbox and they do a DMARC check against your domain, they're checking to see if SPF and DKIM is correctly configured. If it is, that legitimate email will pass DMARC validation. Whereas if it receives a spoof email, which is unauthenticated and has no SPF and DKIM configured, those emails will then start failing DMARC validation and you'll get a report back on this. So what can we do at that point? Once we're confident we've got everything correctly set up with your domain, we can then move your domain policy forwards. So we start off in what's called P=none, which is just report mode only. The great thing with this stage is we can start your DMARC reporting without you having to be worried about affecting any of your email flow. You can plug this record in, let it gather data for a few weeks, and then review that with us. Once we're confident we've got, everything correctly configured that you are using with SPF and DKIM, we can move your domain status to quarantine. At this stage, any DMARC failing emails that we saw here, which are from illegitimate sending services, you would then be instructing the receiving service to quarantine those emails in their spam folder. So it's kind of like an in-between setting of protection at this point. The final stage that we want to try and aim to get our customers to is P=reject. This is the end goal that we aim to get our customers to within about 8 to 10 weeks. Now, once you reach a reject status, you're then telling any receiving services who have received an email that's unauthenticated, i.e. no SPF and DKIM, to block and reject that email. And at this point, this is when you gain domain protection. You gain the key benefits of DMARC, where people can no longer impersonate your domain. And also you actually improve your domain authentication and your domain reputation, which helps to improve your email deliverability rates. So a big issue that companies have faced in the last couple of years is when they send out, let's say, a marketing campaign, emails landing in spam folders. With DMARC fully configured, this will help to improve the rates of those emails landing in inboxes, helping those campaigns run. So that is a little snapshot of DMARC. The last piece to relate to this is a new email security standard called BIMI. So BIMI allows customers, once they get to a policy of P-reject, to add their brand logos into their outgoing emails, and they would appear at this stage in the inbox. What does this do? This helps to improve your brand recognition. It also helps to add an extra stamp of security on your emails, which ultimately results in end users who receive these emails to better trust them and therefore be more likely to open up those emails, therefore really helping to improve open rates potentially again on a campaign. So as a little example, I'll just show you how the Redshift logo may appear in someone's inbox. So, straight away it draws you into that, it improves your brand recognition, and it means I'm more likely then to interact with that email. Cool. So let's go to our spoofing tool now. So if we take in the example, one data solutions.co.uk, one of the interesting parts with DMARC is it's all publicly available information. So for the sake of this demo, we've put Brett's domain back to a policy of report mode. So they're just getting DMARC reports, but they're not yet protected. You can see here it's pointing to our on-demand service here. And this is really important to note because if anyone can check a domain, so can potential people who want to maliciously use your domain, which is why it's so important to be in that reject status. Now, if we look onto the next stage here, I've set up a spoofing email here from Brett's email address to mine. This is just using a randomly generated IP that we're going to send an email out from. I'm going to hit submit for this. This will take a little bit of time to come through and will land in my inbox. And at this point, we'll actually also see our on-inbox solution kick in to show how it can detect a potentially malicious email versus a legitimate email. So you can see it's just loading up here, going through our processing folder. And in this case here, this top one is a legitimate email that Brett sent me earlier. And you can see here the on-inbox shows that it's in green in terms of the authentication and trust. The C is notifying that there might be something slightly malicious in here to look at it because there's an action requesting you to open up a document with urgency. Now down here is the malicious email that I've just sent from Brett's email address. You can see it appears to be exactly the same. We'll run this spoof again. I'll delete this and show it coming through one more time. But you can see in this case, on inbox catches that email, as it's got 0 email authentication, no SPF or DKIM or DMARC configured, malicious content within the email. We detected this message, requested an attachment to be opened with high urgency. And the trust, because this email is not, this receiver is not trusted, as they're not on my trusted senders list. So it's being able to distinguish that email versus Brett's legitimate email that he sent me earlier. So if we just look at that one more time, I'll delete both of these. I'll go back to the partner tools. I'll just actually copy and paste this spoof email again. Click and drag this into here. And send this one more time so we can just see how easy it is for that email to be sent and to come through. So it's processing now. Again, to the naked eye, they look exactly to be like it was from Brett. Without our on inbox tool, it would be very tricky to catch that. So we'll just let this update. There we are. As we can see, as I mentioned earlier, it's an exact domain impersonation. And on inbox has caught that down there nicely. So these tend to be the most effective types of spoofing attacks. These could be targeted at your customers, companies within your supply chain, or directly back into your own organization. Now, you might be thinking, how do we actually then help our customers achieve the DMARC reject status? So let's have a look at a quick demonstration of our tool. So you can sign up for our solution very easily. It's just email and password, and then you get presented with this page here. And the first action we'll be getting you to take is to add your domain into here. Once you do so and click next, we provide you with an action to take. So this is my demo account that I've loaded up for this webinar. And the first step you need to take is to configure this unique DMARC record here into your DNS record, so that all of the DMARC reports that are normally produced, and what I will add at this point, the normal DMARC reports come back in a very dense XML format, which can be massively time consuming to work with. They are all sent to this address here, and we analyze and crunch that data from our side. You can see here, you'll start off in a policy of P none. And these reports will then be presented back to you, and they'll look like this. So we've got our kind of 4 high-level overview reports here: compliance, receivers, location, and delivery. And then we've got a really nice in-depth senders report here too. So if we start with these reports, the compliance report shows you the number of emails being sent from your domain a day, and how many of those could be passing or failing DMARC validation. So to begin with, when you're in a policy of P equals none, you can see in the red here that when DMARC is failing, i.e. no SPF or DKIM configured, these emails are actually not yet being blocked. And it gives you a good indicator to start with of, how many emails potentially are failing that could be a threat, and how many that might also be a misconfigured legitimate service. So through the configuration process, we see the volume of red tend to decrease. Once you then move to quarantine, the yellow here shows you how many emails are effectively being quarantined per day. So at this stage, these will only then be malicious emails that are then landing in the recipient's spam folder. And then finally on the end here, once you achieve P equals reject, which is the end goal, this red kind of crisscross color is showing you how many emails you're actively blocking per day once in a policy of reject. If you were to see a large spike in the volume of failing traffic, it could indicate to a spoofing attack may be happening on your domain, or a new sending service has been added, which we need to then get correctly configured. Next, we have the receivers reports, nice and simple, shows you what email receiving services your recipients are using. We provide you with a top 5 list here, and you can download the full list from this button. We then have the locations report, which is quite an eye-opening one, as it shows you where around the world your domain is potentially being used. So the red dots could indicate DMARC failures. So again, these could be the sources of malicious threats, or they could also be legitimate misconfigured services. The cool thing with this report is once you move to a policy of reject, we then tend to see the volume of red dots over time decrease, because people will then see that you're in a policy of reject. As we looked earlier on the analyzer tool, there's hundreds of tools online where you can run this check, and they tend to see there's less point trying to impersonate your domain when it's in reject. So you see a nice decline on this map. Now, see, we've just got a question, and so I'll just open that out. Show the SPF record again, please. So Tom, to your question, what I'll do, I will just run through I think you might mean the DMARC record there, and we'll go on to our own SPF record in a minute. But in terms of the DMARC record, this is the one we produce here. It's just loading up. And we pre-populate this for you. It's effectively just an email address here. And we give you a unique address at the start, so it's specific to your account. Just open up there. No, okay, perfect. So that's basically what we produce for you, Tom. And we produce an aggregate report, which are the ones we're looking at the moment. And we also have forensic reports, which can provide a little bit more detail around a failed DMARC email. So if that's all good, just let me know if you've got any more questions, and we can run through those later. Cool, so let's move back to the reports again. And we're going to go down to the senders report. It's worth mentioning actually that DMARC report that we make, it's just a simple copy and paste and into your DNS. So if you've got access to your DNS, we can make that change with you in about 5 to 10 minutes and start gathering data on that report. So the senders report, this is the key one that we provide to you, as it shows you all the different sending services that we have detected to be sending on behalf of your domain in that given time period. This can include legitimate services that you know you're using. It can also include maybe some shadow IT services. So a lot of our customers see a large sending service pop up, but they're not aware of them using it. They do some further digging, and they might find out that marketing are using a service, for example. All visibility that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And also we can start to service some potential malicious services, which we help to filter by their reputational score, which comes up as red here. Now, the key bit to look at on this is we mentioned earlier about the importance of having both SPF and DKIM correctly configured. Now let's find a service. So we've got MailChimp here and also Mailgun, two commonly used services that our customers use quite a lot. And if we go along here, we saw that only around 13% and 9% of emails were passing SPF and DKIM. That means if we move to reject tomorrow and this was a legitimate service, you run the risk of blocking a large volume of emails. So what I would then be doing if I was implementing this, I would click into this specific service, see its own individual reports. You can drill further into the host name. But most importantly, you can start to get a breakdown as to why that sending service has potentially failed SPF and DKIM validation. And this is what we can then help with our support team. You'll be assigned a support engineer to run through the data with you and start troubleshooting what these errors are and how essentially to fix them within your DNS. So it's giving you, again, that visibility that you would not have had otherwise until you set up the DMARC report. So let's go back to this. What steps do you want to take next? You want to start marking which of these services, let's take Mimecast as an example, and let's take Google Workspace that we use at Redshift. I'm going to start marking which of these you deem to be an asset, i.e. a legitimate service that you're using. Once those have been marked as an asset, they will be pushed to the email sources tab that we'll look at in a minute. If you deem it to be a threat, you can do the same there from the threat tab. Now from here, this is where for that specific domain, your ongoing management will be run from. So this shows you how your legitimate services for that domain are set up. So if we look at Google Workspace, this 4-part wheel in the top left quadrant is showing you whether or not SPF has been correctly configured within your DNS. And the top right shows you whether or not DKIM has been correctly configured within your DNS. Underneath here is then checking to see whether or not emails, so actual traffic, has passed to confirm that they're correctly set up. So the goal with this is to get these wheels turning fully green, so that when you have these wheels turning fully green, you can be confident that Google Workspace is fully configured, meaning if you were to move that domain forwards to reject, you wouldn't negatively affect any email flow, and you can then start blocking illegitimate emails impersonating your domain. We then help you store the correct SPF includes and the correct DKIM selectors in here. And for well-known services like Google Workspace, we actually pre-populate the correct includes and selectors there. Now, if you're a bit stuck on some of these services, we also support, the implementation with our support team. But on top of that, we give you automated next step instructions within the platform. So if you come down here for Google Workspace, you can click on these setup instructions. And from here, we can then start to run through how to correctly configure a service like Google Workspace. There's a live chat feature down here too. Let's go back to on DMARC now. So then where are we up to? We're up to the email sources tab. We've shown at this point how you then get visibility and detect what services you are and aren't using. You can then start marking which services you are using and what their current setup status is in terms of SPF and DKIM. We then work on the configuration with you, and at that point, you can start to look to move your DMARC policy forwards to quarantine and reject. Some other tools that help you manage all this are within our dynamic DMARC piece. So this really helps our customers simplify their management of SPF, DMARC, and DKIM, but in particular, SPF actually solves a problem. So a big issue that a lot of companies face is exceeding their SPF lookup limitation. Now, how does that happen? So SPF effectively works by adding includes for each legitimate sending service that you as a company use, which is telling receiving services that you're allowing them to send from your domain. The problem here is there is a limit of 10 DNS lookups on your SPF record. So if we look at 101 data solutions again, we can see they're on 5 out of 10 lookups. And in here we can see an include for Infusion Mail, email signatures 360 and Office 365. Now, typically one of these includes will count as, up to sort of 2 to 3, in some cases 4 lookups. So you can quite quickly exceed this 10 lookup limitation. Now, what's the problem if you exceed that? You effectively break your SPF record and it causes a negative effect on your email deliverability. So by that, I mean receiving services are less likely to recognize if that's a legitimate service, and they're more likely to push that email into the spam folder, especially when sending out large volumes of mail. So we give our customers a much better way of managing their SPF going forwards. We give them a smart include, which they can copy and paste into their existing SPF record. You can then pull any of your old previous records, so any includes, A records and MX records, and IP ranges can all be pulled out of your old SPF records, into this page, which ultimately gives you unlimited SPF lookups and a much easier SPF management going forwards. So a classic thing we get from customers is saying, oh, we might not need this now, but from using the reports, they find out new services they're using. They then might get closer to that lookup limitation. And by using this, it's an easier way. You don't have to consistently jump in and out of your DNS records. It's all in one place for you to manage, reducing the risk of making errors too, and essentially troubleshooting that problem that will always be there around exceeding the 10 lookup limitation in the future. We then move on to dynamic DMARC and DKIM. So these allow you to set up name servers within your DNS record, which means you can then make any DMARC changes straight from the solution here, as opposed to logging in and out of your DNS records. So this helps to speed up changes, simplifies your setup and management process of DMARC, and everything is off this one page. So that's a really nice way of managing DMARC there. And for DKIM, what you would essentially do is set up one DKIM key and manage all the selectors underneath it here too, with that same kind of name server format that DMARC followed. Moving on to BIMI, we mentioned this earlier. So once you get to that P reject status, you can then start your BIMI application from here. And our support team can walk you through the process to ensure that you get your brand logo appearing in the best way in your outgoing emails. Now, the last really good feature I want to show for the demo is our Investigate tool. So a common issue which we've addressed with this, which companies face with DMARC, is the time it takes them to get to reject policy. Now, you might be thinking, why is it beneficial to get to reject quickly? The key reason why is the quicker you get to reject, the more illegitimate emails you're going to block. One of those emails could cause a massive negative effect on your company. So you want to, be proactive and block them before they actually get sent out. Now, an issue with DMARC is it takes 24 hours to receive DMARC reports. That's an issue with the DMARC protocol itself, and we have addressed this with Investigate, where you can send a test email from, let's say, your Office 365 account from your MailChimp account, whatever service it is that you use, into this unique email address. We then analyze that email that we've just received, and within about 10 to 20 seconds, we can send you back a report that will look like this. So let's take one. These are some that I've sent in the past. So let's take this one, which I sent yesterday from my Google Workspace account. We then present the results really nicely back to you with these cards to show you what your current DMARC setup status is, what your current SPF status is, your Deacon status. Any errors will be highlighted in here really nice and clearly, and our support team can run through them with you. All of this is also hyperlinked to our knowledge base. We also give you information around your TLS records, return path records, and any URLs within your email. Nice piece we've added in is around threat intelligence. So a potential IP that you're using could be found on some kind of a blacklist or a low reputation score, which could cause more of those emails to land in spam folders, often caused by having shared IPs through companies or services like SendGrid with other companies. So this alerts you to that, and then you can then request a fresh new IP to improve deliverability results. And we also service some information around BIMI. So the kind of thing you can run with this then is, last bit on that, you can actually add different security standards to that. So there's a UK minimum cybersecurity standard. Worth noting, the UK government mandated DMARC set up for all government organisations as well as those supplying to them. So you can run the same test against a different security standard. But the reason why this tool is so important is it means you can make changes and check them live on a call with our support team to really help push you towards that DMARC reject status, not only quickly, but accurately as well. Doing all of this with accuracy is key. So those are some of the key bits around our solution. It's very easy to set up. We can help set you up with an account after this call. It's literally a 10-minute process where we create your account, add your domain in, and then as long as you've got DNS access, or you can always raise a DNS request change, we want to then copy this record into your DNS so we start receiving those reports. And that will give you visibility that you would never have had otherwise, which we can then help review with you. So that's really everything from my side. It's worth noting that DMARC's not the only thing we do. We obviously do the traffic light piece within the emails with on inbox, and the wider domain security piece with on domain, which scans obviously 150 top level and subdomains a day to uncover potential malicious lookalike domains, which we can then help take down for you. So that's everything from me today. Hopefully that was helpful. And obviously we can take away just how easy it is to spoof someone's domain with that example spoof that we ran. Awesome.
Great. Thanks, Harry. A couple of questions that I have in terms of where we are at the moment. Cyber threats are really there's a heightened understanding that there's a lot going on around cyber, and organizations and the UK are saying businesses need to ramp up for it. This tool is very comprehensive in terms of covering that vector. What do you see in this year for Redsift in terms of threats and different things that Redsift are preparing to do in terms of technologies that obviously we can talk about in the public domain?
Yeah, so I mean, big talking point that's always keeps popping up is the rise of ransomware being a big issue for companies. And now people are starting to address that by actually blocking out those attacks. And that often, as we said earlier, comes through email as a big attack vector. Now, that then means we've had to improve solutions like on inbox by adding in more data around the detection of malicious links within emails.
Sure.
We've added in a natural language processing feature as well to pick up on these arising social engineering phishing attacks, where actually they're very sophisticated. They've studied who you are within the business, who you interact with. So that's actually picking out specific language, which might seem off. And actually, like in the one that I sent from you, it's picking up a high urgency related action, which is a common phishing theme within emails. Again, to help alert users on these kind of attacks, which are rising and more sophisticated, which can cause end users, employees to fall up and become victim of them. So that's one of the big things we're doing. But the lookalike domain piece is a massive one, because in the last year or two, there's been something like a 269% increase in the number of newly registered fraudulent domains, which obviously companies are struggling to pick up on, detect, and actually the whole big thing around this is then how do you then action that? How do you block those kind of domains from impersonating you? Which is exactly why we've integrated the service with a takedown service, OPSEC, who are very, good in doing that, so they can do it quickly and in a very kind of, structured way, so we get the best kind of takedown service possible.
What's the primary threat, though, with that particular issue you're talking about there to an organization? Why should I worry about that?
In terms of the lookalike piece?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's a massive one around, the brand reputation is huge for that. You're looking at your customers, other companies you work with, let's say your supply chain as well, receiving illegitimate, fraudulent emails that look like they are from you. And ultimately that is leaving a negative effect on your brand image that those companies or those people are receiving from you. So if you're looking at this, B2C with companies emailing out to, let's say, people like us on this call to our Gmail accounts, that's going to have a massive negative effect. But also the rise in those kind of attacks from business to business as well, they could cause a massive issue with people discontinuing work with them, or, issues around money being sent to the wrong people, all that kind of attacks, right?
Yeah, I see. Well, perhaps next month we could do a session on that if you're happy to do so.
And I think a really interesting piece I read the other day is that you can effectively register and buy these domains very cheaply. There's also services online, like hacker as a service or spoofer as a service. They're very easy to run out. And we saw on that demo earlier just how easy it is to do an exact domain impersonation, let alone a lookalike one, which are going to be ultimately even more effective at fooling someone.
Well, very worrying indeed. Okay, that's great. So thanks very much for your time today, and the Redshift team really do appreciate it. Hope everyone found that as of use. If you require further information, more than happy to talk to you about it. Reach out to your account team. Harry's email address is on the invite, etc. And look out for the next one, which we'll do around the domain piece next month. Thanks very much. Appreciate your time.
Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye. Cheers.